Welcome in everyone to another Baldur's Gate 3 build video. In today's video we are going over a build I like to call the Storm God. Now the Storm God build is really unique in the way that it combines two classes that use two different spell casting modifiers into one, but it actually makes it work. So we're going Tempest Cleric and then we're going Sorcerer for this multi-class build. Alright, so for this multi-class build we are going only 2 levels of Cleric, which we're going to pick up later. We're not going to pick up right at the beginning, and then we are going 10 levels of Draconic Sorcerer. Now I will say, because this is a lightning damage build, I will shout out the Storm Sorcery subclass. However, when you look at Baldur's Gate 3 and you look at what the subclasses give you, I feel like the Storm Sorcery does not give you as much as going lightning focus in the Draconic Sorcery bloodline. However, if you do want to go Storm Sorcery for this build, you can, but I don't think you'll be getting as much raw output with Storm Sorcery as you will with Draconic Ancestor, and you'll see why later in the build. Alright, so the build overview for this is pretty simple. Basically, we are a backline caster who is going to output as much AoE and single target damage as we possibly can with this build, and of course our main focus is on doing lightning and thunder damage, and I'll explain why later on in the video. Now a quick note too with this build is you will have high survivability for a caster. The Draconic Bloodline does give you a little bit more extra HP, but you will also be able to wear heavier armor thanks to your levels in Cleric, so it's nice just to have a little bit more tankiness on your caster as well as survivability. And this build will have some utility in it just by the nature of the spells that we do have access to. However, your primary focus is again going to be on single target and AoE nuking. First things first, you are going to start as a Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer, and just as a quick heads up, from levels 1 through level 6 you are going to play basically as a stereotypical sorcerer. Once you get to level 6 you will have, that's when your lightning focus really starts coming into play, but for now through levels 1 through levels 5 you can play as just like a normal regular sorcerer and do your normal regular sorcerer thing. Alright, so now let's go from level 1 all the way to level 12 and we'll give a quick overview of what this build looks like, how it's going to play, and what spells to take. Alright, so since we're Draconic Sorcerer we do get to pick a Dragon Ancestor. Now personally I would go with blue, or you have access to bronze as well. However, I like blue better because I do like getting the Witch Bolt over what bronze offers you. So really this is personal preference, but make sure that you either go bronze or you go blue, so that way you have the lightning affinity, which is super important for later on in this build. Alright, so level 1, you are going to get access to a couple spells and a couple cantrips. Now the cantrips that you take are really up to you. However, the ones that I like are on the screen right here, so that way you can see these are the ones I personally prefer. However, this is really up to you and the spells that you want to take. Again, you're playing as a very stereotypical sorcerer, so just keep that in mind. You will be squishy, you will be a backline caster and just focusing on casting and damaging enemies from a far range. Alright, and here are the level 1 spells, as you can see right here. Now in terms of the level 1 spells, a couple that I do want to shout out is I do want to shout out Chromatic Orb, because I do think that in general, in most cases, Chromatic Orb is your best level 1 range spell, so it is really nice to have. And then Thunderwave, not only will Thunderwave and Chromatic Orb and their usefulness go up as we start to get our lightning and thunder damage synergies, but Thunderwave is really nice because sometimes you are going to have enemies approach you, and instead of just moving out of the way and attacking and invoking an attack of opportunity, you can Thunderwave and you can knock enemies away from you, so that way you do not provoke that attack of opportunity and can keep yourself safe. Alright, so this is what your level 1 stats are going to look like. You can feel free to change this as you see fit. This is for min-maxing purposes, but the main thing you need to focus on is having as high charisma as possible, and then when it comes to constitution and dex, those will be your next highest. You can mix and match however you want to. I prefer to have a higher constitution. However, if you do want to have a higher dex score, then you can go with that as well. Alright, so moving on to level 2, this will give us access to sorcery points as well as our meta magic options. On the screen are the meta magic options that I like to take. This is not exactly in order of priority, this is in order of what you can take them and then which ones I like. So I like Twin Spell because it does allow you to basically just copy a spell. You can do 2 Chromatic Orbs, which is super strong early in the game. Distance Spell for when you need a little bit more range on your spells and you just can't quite get into range to kill that enemy that's super far away. And then Quicken Spell is going to be your best meta magic option, especially later in the game, because this will allow you to do things like shoot 2 lightning bolts off in 1 turn, which is absolutely insane. Moving on to level 3, the biggest thing that we get is we get to pick another meta magic option, and on top of that we get to pick the Quicken Spell meta magic option, which is the one you should be taking. This just allows you to cast the spell as a bonus action speed instead of an action speed, which is really nice because, like I said before, this will allow you to drop your high damage spells twice in a turn, which is absolutely insane, and this really helps with the build's overall damage potential. So level 3 gives you access to your level 2 spells, and as you can see on the screen, these are the spells that I would personally take. One of the core spells I think in most casters builds is going to be Misty Step, because it does allow you to reposition without provoking attacks and opportunity, or just getting into positions to where you can use your spells more effectively or hit more enemies, especially when you're trying to line up like a big lightning bolt later on in the game, stuff like that. So I really do like Misty Step. Scorching Ray and Shatter are going to be your ranged AoE and multi-target damage spells, so make sure to pick those up as well, and everything else is personal preference, but these on the screen are the spells that I personally like to take. Alright, so now that we're level 4, we get a feat or we get an ASI. Now personally, I'm going to take the ability score improvement because I want to bump my charisma up to the next threshold, so this is what it will look like for you. Now you can take the other point and put it wherever you want to, but just make sure that you do get charisma up. And I will shout out, this is a little spoiler, so if you don't want to hear this part, you can go ahead and skip ahead. There's chapters down below, but there is in Act 1 a way to get a +1 to any ability that you want through a quest line. So if you want to put both your points in charisma and then use that, you can get your charisma bumped up to 20 super fast. Alright, so now we're level 5, and everyone knows level 5 is when you get a huge increase in power. For casters like the sorcerer, we get access to level 3 spells, and level 3 spells are when things get really crazy. So here is the list of the spells that I would personally take in no particular order, but these are both really good spells, and make sure that you are picking up Lightning Bolt. That's the only thing I'm going to say, because once we hit level 6 and above, that is when our lightning/thunder damage synergies really start coming into play, so you want to make sure that you do pick up Lightning Bolt. Alright, we are finally level 6, which means that the synergies for this Lightning Storm God build are finally coming into play. So what you get is a Draconic Ancestor, and you pick Lightning, of course, is you get elemental affinity damage and resistance. The resistance is nice because it does allow you to get resistance to the damage type that you picked, but the main reason why we are here at level 6 is for the damage. So what happens is at level 6, when you do cast a spell or do damage of the type associated with your Draconic Ancestor, which in this case is going to be lightning, you get to add your charisma modifier to that damage, which is nice because it's a nice increase and boost in our damage, and it helps with our primary role, which is to be an AoE and single target ranged nuker. Alright, so now that we have our synergy for the Lightning Storm God build, this is where you kind of switch up your gameplay a little bit, and this is where you should start focusing on using things like Lightning Bolt and Chromatic Orb in the lightning setting, so that way you can maximize your damage output that you're doing, because now you do have, like I said before, access to the ability to add your charisma modifier to the damage of your lightning spells. So your gameplay will change a little bit, but just make sure to use lightning spells as much as possible when you're doing damage, so that way you can maximize your overall damage output. Alright, so now we are level 7, and this is where we are going to start picking up our levels in Cleric. So we're going to go with Tempest Domain Cleric, if that wasn't obvious enough, and at first level you get a couple spells, and then you do get a reaction, which allows you to, when you do get hit by, I believe it's only a melee attack, then you do get to do some lightning or thunder damage back to the person, which is nice, but for the most part we're really not going to be in melee combat, so you won't use this too much, but it is a nice thing to have. Alright, so level 8, this is where we're going to take our final level in Cleric, and this is part of the reason why this build is so strong, and the main reason why we multi-class in the first place, and that is because we get access to Destructive Wrath. Now what Destructive Wrath does is it allows you, whenever you do damage with thunder or lightning, it allows you to, instead of roll the dice and see what damage you get, is just to do the max damage that spell can do. And this is absolutely insane, because this is where your huge AoE and single target nuke damage comes from. Now I think that you can only use this once per short rest at a level 2 Cleric. Correct me in the comments down below if I'm wrong, but still being able to take those turns where you are lightning bolting and then quickening another lightning bolt and max rolling that damage on one of those is absolutely insane, and you will make quick work of encounters. So this is absolutely huge. This is going to be your huge, incredible power spike in this build, and you will absolutely decimate any fight that you come across. Alright, so now we're level 9, which means we're a level 7 Sorcerer. We're going back to Sorcerer. Like I said before, we're going to finish off with Sorcerer. You get access to level 4 spells at this level, which is really nice, but we already have our core spells. So here are a couple spells that I like to shout out and that I personally like taking. However, at this level, you can really take whatever you want because you already have your core spells. And like I said before, you really are focusing on just using your lightning and thunder damage spells to maximize your damage every single turn. Alright, so moving on to level 10, this is is where we're going to be a level 8 sorcerer, which means you do get another feat or ASI. You can take an ASI if you want to at this point, or you can take a feat. Personally, I would go with Warcaster. This helps maintain concentration on your spells by giving you advantage on your Constitution saving throw, so you can still maintain that concentration, and this will help a lot because there's a couple spells that are really nice to concentrate on, like haste, for example, which will, again, if you're hasted and you're doing everything you can with this build, you will be outputting so much damage. So it's really nice to maintain concentration on haste, as well as a couple other spells. So that's what I would personally pick. However, if you want to take an ASI or another feat, you can do that as well. It is really up to you. All right, so now we're level 11, which means we get access to our 5th level spells. Now, because you already do have your core spells, you can take literally whatever you want here. I'm going to leave it completely up to you, just whatever suits your boat, or whatever spells that you feel like will really add, or if you want more utility, you can take that. But because we already have our core spells, like I said before, this is really up to you and what you want to take. It's completely personal preference at this point. All right, so level 12, our final level in Baldur's Gate 3, you get access to another meta magic option, which is really nice. You can take whatever you want here. You have like what I believe to be the core meta magic options and the best one. So again, this is personal preference because, like I said, our build is already has all of its core components working, so you can take whatever you want here. There's a couple that I like. Here is a couple on the screen that I would personally take at this level, but once again, you can take whatever you want. All right, so now that we are done with the level guide, I'm going to go over a couple tips and tricks and just a general how to play this build. So as I said, from levels 1 through 5, you are really just going to be playing as a stereotypical sorcerer. So you're going to want to stay in the back line. You're going to want to do your damage from range and just stay as safe as possible while just casting your spells, doing your damage, doing your utility, everything like that. And then once you get to level 6 is when you're going to switch focus a little bit and mainly just focus on doing lightning damage. There's thunder damage as well, but the thunder damage doesn't come into play as much in this build. It's mainly about doing that lightning damage because of our draconic ancestry. All right, so one of the things that I feel like is really core and really important to playing this build is positioning. Positioning with this build is huge, especially because the way that your main damage spell lightning bolt works, it is a straight line and it's pretty far, but the straight line is going to do damage and everything in that straight line, which means that positioning to maximize the amount of enemies you can hit and the damage that you can output per round is going to be super important. And this is why we have Misty Step, is so that way we can put ourselves in more advantageous positions, so that way we can do that max damage. So just really focus on staying in the back line and also looking for high ground and other opportunities to line up the perfect lightning bolt. All right, so our next tip is going to be with another party member. So if you have a party member that can use the spell Create or Destroy Water or a similar effect, this is really nice, because what you can do is you can have that party member apply the wet status effect to enemies, and then when you do your lightning damage, you will apply the electrocuted status effect on the enemies, which is going to be a little bit extra damage and give you just a little bit more support benefits as well. So that is a really nice way to increase the overall viability of this build and just do a little bit more, and a small little tip that I really like personally using. All right, and another thing is, even though we are really focusing on our spells like lightning bolt as our core damage spell, you don't always have to look for setting up the perfect lightning bolt. If you can't do it for whatever reason, you can't get in position, enemies are too spread out, and you still want to have like one single target nuke on an enemy, or maybe there's only 2 and you don't feel like wasting that level 3 spell slot, what you can do, and what I highly recommend, is doing something like twinning a chromatic orb and then just using lightning, and then you can just hit 2 enemies instead. And this gives you more versatility because they don't have to be right next to each other. They can be farther apart and you can hit them, and that will save you. Not only will be more efficient because it will save you on those later level spell slots, but also on top of that, you still get to output a lot of damage, and you don't have to worry as much about setting up that perfect lightning bolt if the situation has not presented the opportunity to do so. All right, and this is a little metagaming trick that I like to do. So one of the things is, if you know a combat encounter is coming up, if you see the enemies out in the field and it looks like a hard encounter, or if you just want to go absolutely crazy, then one of the things that I really like doing, and I recommend you do, is to cast haste on yourself right before a combat encounter, so that way you do not have to use it in combat and waste that action, and it's just way more efficient. So cast haste on yourself, go into the combat encounter, and then you can go crazy by dropping lightning bolts and chromatic orbs like an absolute madman. And I guarantee in most encounters, your first round of combat, when this build goes, you will destroy almost everything, if not everything, in that first turn, because of the fact that you're hasted, because of your max roll lightning damage that you're doing. all of that combined, you are going to absolutely decimate combat encounters in that very first round. All right, and that is the Storm God build. So as a quick recap of what this build is this build is going to be a single target and AoE nuker. You're going to output an insane amount of damage, and you get to abuse the fact that you can get a max roll on your lightning damage or thunder damage, but mainly you're going to be focusing on lightning damage. So you get to abuse the fact that you can come in and absolutely drop an insane amount of damage while all being relatively safe and staying in the back line. So that is the main focus of this build. I do really hope you enjoyed this build, and I know I didn't cover equipment and other stuff in this build. That's not something that I particularly do in my builds because there is a lot of spoilers and other things that come with it. However, in my future builds, if you do want me to start covering equipment to help with that overall build and get a more complete build of what like a level 12 character would look like, let me know down in the comment section down below, and I can easily implement that into my build videos. But that's all for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you did, and make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can see more Baldur's Gate 3 builds, and I will see you in the next one.